I turned 40 the year my husband cheated on me. I married him at 20. 20 years had passed since then. Everyone said he'd already been more than generous to me. Handsome. Wealthy. He even put me in charge of the household money. Compared to other men, they said, he was better than most. This betrayal, they believed, was something I should endure. Chapter 1. At first, I really did try to endure it. The girl was so young, she looked barely 17 or 18, while my husband, Chad, had just turned 41. Our child was already in college. The girl came to see me, eyes red and voice trembling, asking me to let her have her love. Her eyes sparkled, just like mine had years ago, when I once loved without hesitation. Now, when I looked in the mirror, there were fine lines at the corners of my eyes, and sometimes, in the morning, I would spot a single strand of gray hair near my ear. I can divorce him, I said. I was only teasing her. But Chloe didn't catch it. Her eyes widened in surprise. You really would step aside, she asked. Sure, I said. And then what do you plan to do? She pouted and thought for a moment. I want to go on a honeymoon somewhere tropical, she said. And then I'll give him a son. You don't know this, but he really wants a son. He's always been asking me to have one for him. Chad wanted a son? Back then, after I nearly bled to death during childbirth, he had been the one who insisted on getting a vasectomy because he couldn't bear the thought of putting me through that again. Times had really changed. I lost all interest in playing along. I crossed my arms and leaned back. Chloe, right? I said. I was joking earlier. Chad and I have been married for 20 years. Our family's businesses have been tied together for a long time now. Divorce isn't an option. Instead of thinking about where to honeymoon, you'd be better off thinking about how to get more money out of him. When I got home, Chad was sitting on the couch, going over documents. Time had been kind to him. Even in his 40s, age had only added a trace of maturity to his features, making him even more attractive. He didn't look up when he heard me come in. That was our unspoken rule after 20 years together. As long as I didn't speak first, it meant there was nothing to discuss. I went into the kitchen. A short while later, I brought out dinner. Chad set his phone aside and sat down at the table. Emily said she'll be home during fall break, he said. She wants you to pick her up. Okay. My mom hasn't been feeling well lately. She needs to get checked. Okay. You can take care of it. The bathroom floor is getting slippery. I'm thinking of having it renovated. That's fine. Do what you think is best. Chloe came to see you. He finally lifted his head from his bowl and looked at me. Calm. Detached. With a hint of confusion. So, he asked. His mistress had shown up at my door, and his response was so. Even though I'd long since learned not to lose my temper, the words still caught in my throat. I frowned at him. Chad, we're married. What you're doing is cheating. Something I said must have struck a nerve. He slammed his bowl down. Anna, don't make it sound so ugly. Chloe is still just a kid. It's not the kind of relationship you're imagining. Don't make things up. A kid? Since when had Chad become so good at lying to himself? Dinner ended in silence, the kind that cuts. I thought we'd stay locked in that cold standoff for a while. I didn't expect that the very next day, after grocery shopping, I'd walk into the living room and see Chloe sitting there. She was wearing the slippers I'd bought for my daughter, watching Chad peel an apple for her. Wow, you're really good at this, she said brightly. You didn't even break the peel. He gave a soft laugh. It's nothing. Here. Eat slowly. The sight of that smooth, glossy apple made my mouth taste bitter. I used to love apples. He'd learned how to peel them neatly because of me. I never imagined he'd one day do it for another woman. Chloe sat happily on the couch, her pale legs swinging back and forth. I saw Chad's gaze darken. That was exactly what he wanted. He reached out, pulled her closer, and lifted her onto his lap. Just before the two of them leaned in, I pushed the door open and walked in. When Chloe saw me, she didn't move away from him. She only tilted her head and smiled. Oh, hi, she said. We meet again. Sorry, she added lightly. I twisted my ankle, and Chad was helping me check it. You don't mind, do you? She shifted slightly. Chad let out a muffled grunt. I'd been protected too well in the first half of my life. Now, when it came time to fight back, I had no idea how. Should I slap her like some hysterical wife? Or scratch that cheating bastard's face? Neither felt particularly smart. Maybe divorce would be better. I'd been married to him for 20 years. Half his assets were mine. If we split, it would probably be worth hundreds of millions. Maybe I'd even find a younger guy afterward. The thought startled me. I froze, realizing how far my mind had wandered. I couldn't tell whether I should marvel at my own endurance or rein in this sudden rush of excitement at the thought of freedom. After a moment, I set the groceries down on the table. Then I turned to Chad and said, "Let's get a divorce." Chapter 2. Chad refused to agree, claiming he hadn't crossed any fundamental lines. He even mobilized relatives and friends to talk me out of it. The parents I had taken care of for 20 years said that he hadn't physically cheated, that I should just endure it for now, and that later they would step in and have him transfer 5% of the company's shares to me. Our mutual friend said that the girl was only after money anyway, and that if I left, wouldn't I be giving her exactly what she wanted? Chad's business was thriving, his net worth growing by the day, and only a fool, they said, would hand that kind of wealth over to someone else. Even my close friend, who was also going through a divorce because her husband had cheated, tried to persuade me to let it go. The only difference, she said with a sigh, was that her husband was broke and ugly. Any man who could still breathe would cheat sooner or later, she told me. At least Chad had money. See how it worked. Wealth had somehow become a get-out-of-jail-free card, capable of absolving every sin within a marriage. I didn't respond. I kept preparing the paperwork for divorce. When my father heard the news, he showed up too. The moment he walked in, he slapped me across the face. His face was flushed with anger. What man doesn't have business dinners? What's wrong with having one or two women on the side? He's treated you well for 20 years, was that not enough? You really have to push things to the point of divorce and public disgrace? You're 40 now. Who do you think would still want you after that? He looked well-fed and well cared for. My stepmother was clearly taking good care of him, and my newly added younger brother was obedient and sweet. There was no room left for concern over whether I felt wronged. The last person to try to persuade me was my daughter, who was away at college. When she came home, I instinctively reached out to hug her. She shoved me away. "Why do you insist on divorcing Dad?" I had always carried myself with confidence in front of others, but at that moment, I shrank back. "Your father has another woman," I said. "Mom doesn't want to keep living like this anymore." "You mean Chloe?" "Dad already said she's just a friend." My daughter looked at me impatiently, her expression identical to Chad's. "Mom, you've lived a pampered life your whole life. Can you really handle it if you get divorced? And if you can't get used to it, don't expect me to take care of you." To be honest, before she came home, I had believed that at the very least, the child I had raised with my own hands would give me a hug. I thought she would be furious, that she would confront her father and demand to know why he was hurting her mother, that she would stand firmly on my side and draw a clear line between us and a cheating man. Instead, the moment she came back, she unleashed her anger on me and stormed upstairs. The door slammed shut with a thunderous bang, sending a tremor through my soul. "Anna, how did you end up like this?" That night, while I was showering, Chad unexpectedly came into the bathroom. It had been a year since we'd last been intimate. When he stepped in, his gaze was cool and distant. But his hands didn't stop, moving over my body with familiar ease. "Don't be angry," he said softly. "Okay? I'll send her away tomorrow. She won't appear in front of you again." My body slowly warmed, but my heart only grew colder. I closed my eyes and let the tears mix with the water as they slid down my face. "Chad. Did you sleep with her?" He stayed silent. The answer was obvious, and rage surged straight up my chest. "You really make me sick." That Chloe was the same age as our daughter. If he'd gone after someone in her 20s or 30s, I could at least have written it off as a man being lecherous. But he chose a girl the same age as our child. She was so young, barely out in the world. How could he bring himself to do it? Chad snapped, shoving me away hard. Chapter 3. A sharp pain shot through my ankle before I could even look down. He grabbed my chin and dragged me in front of the mirror. "I make you sick," he sneered. "What about you? Don't you disgust yourself? Look at that butchered haircut, where's the femininity in you? Look at your breasts, sagging all the way down to your stomach. And your face, those blotches make it impossible to even look at you. Anna, do you even look like a woman anymore? He pinched my chest viciously, his eyes cold as ice. We'll just live like this, he said. I'll make sure you're fed and clothed for the rest of your life. But if you divorce me, you'll regret it. You'll wish you were dead. Long after Chad left, I was still shaking. I couldn't believe the man I'd loved for 20 years could say things like that. Or maybe, he had changed long ago, and I was the one who refused to see it. I clenched my fists until blood ran down my palms. The sharp pain cleared my head. Chad, do you really think I have no way out? That you can do whatever you want? Just wait. This marriage, I'm ending it. The next morning, when I came downstairs, Chad had actually made breakfast. Our daughter was eating. When she saw me, she lowered her head again, clearly unwilling to engage. Chad played the good guy instead, coaxing her gently. Emily, we agreed yesterday that you'd forgive Mom. Only then did she grudgingly say, Mom. You were tired from traveling yesterday, he said to me softly. Come eat. I made you a sandwich you like. Our eyes met. There was undisguised smugness in his. I didn't say anything. Not long after, the doorbell rang, and the housekeeper led Chloe inside. Good morning, Anna, Chloe said brightly. I brought some documents for Chad. They shook hands openly. Our daughter didn't find it strange at all and even invited Chloe to eat with us. Chloe hesitated for a second, then turned and sat down in my seat. As if to spite me, Emily pushed my breakfast in front of her and poured her a glass of orange juice, the kind I usually drank. Chloe tried her hardest to win Emily over. After exchanging school details, they discovered they'd attended the same university. Oh wow, Emily, you're so nice, Chloe said with a sweet smile. I thought you'd dislike me, just like Anna does. My mom's been on edge lately. She's paranoid and suspicious. She keeps insisting you're sleeping with my dad. Just ignore her. By the end of that meal, the two of them had somehow become friends. I stopped listening the moment Emily said I was being paranoid. I walked out of the house. There was someone I needed to see. A classmate I hadn't seen in over a decade. My first love. A top-tier attorney named David. Chapter 4. At a cafe, I told David I wanted a divorce. He gave a cold snort. You sure you can give it up? For a man his age, he still had an awful temper. If he'd been even a little gentler back then, I probably wouldn't have broken up with him in the first place. Too lazy to argue with this stubborn mule, I pulled a card out of my bag. I checked your rates. Your market price is $1 million. Here's $500,000. I'll pay the rest after the divorce. This is a transaction. Don't make it emotional. David toyed with the card for a moment, then slipped it into his bag. Understood, my generous patron. On the way back, he offered to drive me. While I'd spent these years wrapped in family life, his had been much leaner. I'd heard his wife had passed away from illness several years earlier. They'd never had children. He'd poured everything into his work and built a formidable career, becoming one of the city's most sought-after lawyers. David drove a flashy Maserati, the engine roaring obnoxiously as it moved. I frowned. At our age, how can you still like something this showy? No idea how his wife ever put up with him. David raised an eyebrow. You used to like it too. Forgot? That shut me up. In my 20s, I'd loved this kind of flashy nonsense. But what normal 40-year-old still had the energy for it? His stamina really was impressive. I didn't bother saying more. After I got out of the car, I transferred him another 100. A moment later, he texted, confused. Gas money, I replied. Got it, he texted back. My generous patron. Despite the ridiculous car, David taught me a great deal about preparing for a divorce. Following his advice, I managed to trace Chad's bank accounts and hired a private investigator, who photographed the place where he was keeping his mistress hidden. It was an apartment I bought before marriage. We'd lived there during our early years of dating and marriage. Later, after Emily was born and we hired live-in help, the space became too small, and we moved into the current house. I hadn't been back in years. And Chad had hidden her there? I dug out the keys and went on a day when they weren't around, unlocking the apartment myself. Nothing had really changed inside. There were just more odds and ends. It was obvious Chloe truly wanted to marry Chad. Behind the couch hung a framed photo of the two of them together. By the dining table sat knitted dolls she'd made by hand. In the kitchen, a pot of rich soup was still being kept warm. If the photo on the wall hadn't been posed the same way mine once was. If the doll she'd crocheted hadn't been an orange plush toy, my favorite. If the soup simmering on the stove hadn't been the recipe I created specifically for Chad's stomach problems. Then maybe I would have applauded this devoted pair of lovers. But I had only ever written that recipe down for his mother. Which meant that in this world, aside from me, she was the only one who knew it. And now it was here, in the place where Chloe lived. The layers of betrayal piled up until I couldn't help wondering whether I was truly that much of a failure, so much so that everyone around me had chosen to hurt me without hesitation. Just as my emotions surged, the door suddenly opened. Chloe walked in, beaming. She turned and threw herself into Chad's arms. "This is amazing. Chad, I'm finally going to give you a son." Chad reached out affectionately and stroked her face. When he lifted his head, his eyes met mine. Chapter 5. It was the first time I'd ever seen panic on Chad's face. He probably never imagined he'd see me here. And yet, instead of losing control, I found myself growing calm. I took out my phone and started recording. When he saw it, he lunged forward to grab it. I stopped him. "Chad, think carefully. This place has security cameras. If I pull the footage, the two of you won't be able to show your faces anywhere." Chad took a rough breath. After years in business, he was used to controlling everything. Faced with me, someone he could no longer control, his instinctive response was irritation. "Anna, stop making a scene. Go home. I want a divorce." "I'm not divorcing you. Give it up. I want a divorce. Tomorrow. Or this video goes public." "Why are you doing this? Have you thought about your father? About my parents? About our daughter?" When he mentioned Emily, something inside me finally snapped. I grabbed a vase and smashed it against the floor. "Shut up. Shut up. Shut up. Don't you dare mention them." I rushed forward and slapped him hard across the face. "You bastard. You didn't think about them when you cheated. You didn't think about them when you had a child with another woman. And now that I've caught you red-handed, you expect me to think about them? What kind of world-class double standard is that? You're an old man who can't control himself. You disgust me, and now you think you can silence me? Dream on. Either you divorce me tomorrow, or we go to court and destroy each other. Your choice." I went straight to David's law office. He happened to be free, found me a private room, and poured me a glass of water. "What happened?" he asked. "You look furious." "Don't ask," I said. I ran into the mistress. "She's pregnant. How do you feel about it now?" That was enough to make my anger flare again. "How do you think I feel? Does it even matter what I think at this point?" David paused, then nudged the glass of water a little closer to me. That small gesture extinguished my anger instantly. "Sorry," I said. "I shouldn't have snapped at you." He shrugged. "It's fine. The customer is always right." David said that given the circumstances, the situation was very much in my favor. The photos I'd taken of the apartment, combined with the fact that Chad had gotten another woman pregnant, constituted undeniable proof of marital misconduct, which would work to my advantage in the division of assets. My mind felt numb. I couldn't quite describe what I was feeling. When I left the firm, he offered to walk me out. I declined. I wanted to be alone for a while. Chapter 6. I wandered through the park for 2 or 3 hours. It was a Friday afternoon. Only a few people were out walking. There was a young couple who looked deeply in love. As the boy took photos of the girl, he leaned over to steal a kiss. Once upon a time, Chad and I had been just like that. We'd met on campus. We started dating in high school, and by college, we were known as the golden couple everyone envied. The Foster family was well off. Chad was good-looking and academically gifted, and I'd lost count of how many girls tried to steal him away from me. But Chad never wavered. He gave me complete security, and in our sophomore year of college, he proposed to me. In fairy tales, princes and princesses always end up walking into marriage hand in hand. I never realized that while becoming lifelong partners was one thing, staying together for a lifetime was something else entirely. After graduation, Chad took over the family business. Before long, he multiplied its profits several times over. He traveled constantly. On the day our daughter was born, he was still out of town signing contracts. His parents favored sons over daughters. After Emily was born, they pressured me openly and in subtle ways more times than I could count, but Chad blocked them every time. Only because he was terrified of me facing another life-threatening hemorrhage after childbirth. He held me high in his hands, sheltering me safely inside an ivory tower. What I never realized was that the person holding me up had long since grown impatient, unwilling to give me even a moment to react before letting go. In truth, Chloe wasn't the first woman to appear in Chad's life. She was simply the first one he allowed to show up in front of me. He was testing where my bottom line in this marriage lay. Or perhaps, in the end, he wanted the best of both worlds. When I returned home, his parents were there, chatting happily with my daughter. That foolish child, protected so well by me, had no idea of the malice her grandparents carried in their hearts. Chloe stood at the center of it all, smiling sweetly. Chad looked up and saw me. The red mark on his face was still there, and he didn't look nearly as pleased as I'd expected. Because he saw it too, the resolve in my expression. After 20 years of marriage, we didn't need words to understand each other. His face suddenly hardened as he turned to Chloe and said, "You should go home now." The air turned cold all at once. Chloe stared at him in shock. "Why? I told you to leave." "So leave." In the Foster household, money was power. Chad's word carried the weight of a decree. His parents didn't dare say a thing, clearly confused by his sudden change in attitude. His mother shot me an unhappy look. Chad called for the driver. Chloe left reluctantly, turning back every few steps. Emily panicked and shouted at me, "Mom, what's wrong with you now? Why are you making Chloe leave? She came to hang out with me. She's my friend." For the first time, I didn't bother to soften my tone. I sneered. "You're friends with your father's mistress? I already told you, it's a misunderstanding. There's nothing going on between them. Chloe is pregnant with your father's child." Emily froze. "Dad, is that true?" Chapter 7. Chad sent everyone away and sat across from me at the table. "I don't understand, Anna. Why do you have to make things so ugly?" he said, rubbing his head in irritation. "I already told you, Chloe won't affect your position. Once the child is born, you'll be the mother. Our relationship won't change." I stared at him. How could anyone say something like that so confidently? I laughed in anger and asked him outright. Chad slammed his hand on the table. "Why can't it be like this? Look at men in our circle. Some of them are in their 60s and still having kids on the side. Their wives know, and look the other way. There are guys who keep an apartment overseas just for women they don't bring home. Everyone knows it. No one says a word. What about me? I just want a son to make my parents happy. If it weren't for your health, why would I have gone looking elsewhere? Anna, be honest with yourself. Have I treated you badly all these years? Your mom died, your dad only cares about your stepmother and your brother. I used money to make them treat you politely. Every time you went back showing off, wasn't it me backing you up? At every class reunion, you're dripping in jewelry, spending freely, with everyone admiring you. You think that's because you're impressive? They're flattering me, Chad. My mother pushes me every year to give her a grandson. I kept saying no, that Emily alone was enough. Do you think I don't want a son? I've built a business this big, am I supposed to just hand it over to outsiders? So tell me, are you naive or am I? Anna. Enough already. Like your friend said, don't be ungrateful." His voice grew louder and louder, his face flushed with indignation, as if I were the one at fault in all of this. I laughed again, furious. So this was what happened when anger reached its peak. I didn't even know whether I should curse him for being cruel and heartless, or mock myself for being so naive. The 20 years of marriage I once believed to be loving and complete were, in his eyes, nothing more than charity. I looked up at him. His features hadn't changed much over the years, but now, when I saw him, he looked unbearably ugly. I had no interest in trading accusations inside a marriage already destroyed by infidelity. At this point, right and wrong no longer mattered. What mattered was getting what I was owed, and then getting divorced. I stood up and pulled a stack of documents from my bag. "Since you're clearly so dissatisfied with me," I said evenly, "I assume you won't have any objections to a divorce. The agreement is here. Sign it." Chad stared at me in disbelief. "After everything I've said, you still want a divorce?" "Yes," I said. "I do." "Fine," he said coldly. "Don't regret it." He skimmed the document at lightning speed, signed with a sweeping stroke, and just like that, brought our 20-year marriage to an end. Chapter 8. While we waited for the paperwork to go through, the first thing I did was move out of the foster house. When I finished packing more than a dozen boxes, I realized that most of what I owned were gifts Chad had given me, designer pieces, custom evening gowns. Only then did it hit me how lax I'd become over the years, how I'd let myself dissolve into this role, almost deserving of being cast aside. After some thought, I contacted a luxury resale shop and had them take everything away to sell online at a loss. I donated the proceeds to the Red Cross. The second thing I did was rent an apartment and look for a job. It wasn't as difficult as I'd imagined. Even though we'd had live-in help, I'd personally handled many things related to Chad and our daughter over the years. I found a fully furnished one-bedroom apartment and moved in. As for work, before I had time to think it through, David reached out. He asked if I'd like to join his firm as an administrative assistant. I didn't pretend otherwise. I'd been out of the workforce for too long, and I needed something to ease the transition. After a brief rest, I started working at David Harris Law. The firm had a little over 200 employees, with 7 or 8 people just in administration. My role focused on employee benefits and incentive programs. The work wasn't complicated, and the pay was modest. Back then, I'd spent more than that on a single handbag without thinking twice. But it was the first money I'd ever earned with my own hands. Not long after I started, David asked if I'd consider returning to the legal profession. After graduating from college, Chad had been busy with work, the elders at home were unwell, and I never took a job. I stayed home to care for them instead. Later, as his income soared and he handed all the money to me, he told me there was no need for me to suffer through work anymore. Then I had a daughter, and I couldn't bear to be apart from her. Looking back now, one wrong step led to another. The moment I disconnected from society and became a woman anyone could see through at a glance, being abandoned by a man became only a matter of time. I accepted David's suggestion. I bought stacks of books, started reviewing, and prepared for the bar exam. During that time, my daughter reached out once, saying she wanted to come see me. I refused. The collapse of my ivory tower had already broken my spine. It was time for her to experience the storm as well. Even if she fell, she'd learn to stand. And I would try to build myself another solid shelter from the wind. Still, I knew everything that was happening back at the house. The housekeeper, who had worked for me for 20 years, told me everything. Chloe moved in the very day after I left and immediately began acting like the lady of the house. She was young and spoiled by Chad. She dropped out of school altogether, fixated on becoming a wealthy wife. Emily eventually came to her senses and realized Chloe's predatory intentions, but it was too late. Chloe was carrying a son, and Chad's parents protected her like a treasure. More than once, my mother-in-law hurled vicious insults at Emily, calling her useless, calling her the end of the family line. It enraged Emily so badly that she ran away from home. Chad didn't go looking for her either. He even cut off her credit card. In the end, Emily had no choice but to slink back home, swallow her pride, and apologize to Chloe. That very night, she called me in tears. The moment I picked up, she started yelling, "What kind of mother are you? You only care about yourself. There's a homewrecker living in the house, and you won't even lift a finger? Dad has so much money, are you really just going to hand it all over to someone else? Have you ever thought about me at all?" I replied calmly, "I'm studying for the bar exam," and hung up. Emily blocked me and returned to school early. I shut out the world completely. I nearly wore through the thick stacks of exam prep books. Even David joked that I looked exactly like I had 20 years ago when I studied. Finally, on an early autumn day, I walked into the exam room. Chapter 9. The day I received my license, I got a call from my daughter. She was crying so hard she could barely breathe, unable to form a single sentence. No matter how cold I'd been to her, she was still my child. I immediately prepared to go to her school. When David heard, he insisted on coming with me. We drove through the night to Emily's campus. Only after we arrived did we learn what had happened. Emily's boyfriend had cheated on her. The moment he heard that I'd divorced her father, and that her stepmother was pregnant with a son, this opportunistic man immediately got involved with another woman. Emily had grown up with everything going her way. She'd never experienced humiliation like this. To her, it felt as if the sky had collapsed. I wiped her tears. "Do you know who the other girl is?" Emily shook her head. "No. I only know she goes to our school." I had David take her back to the hotel. I drove alone to the campus. Using the photo she'd shown me, I waited at the school gate for the boy to appear. Luck was on my side. Not long after, Emily's boyfriend, Ryan, stepped out of a Mercedes. He even walked around to the driver's side and spoke to the person inside for a moment. When Ryan left and I looked up, I froze. The driver was wearing sunglasses and a mask, but I recognized her instantly. It was Chloe. So, my daughter's boyfriend was involved with her stepmother? Even after everything I'd been through, the realization made my head spin. Back at the hotel, David listened to everything, studied the photos, and suddenly said, "Do you think this was planned?" One of them dating Emily. The other getting close to Chad. I asked Emily to come in so we could talk. Her eyes and nose were red. She said softly, "Mom." The usual arrogance was gone. Looking at how wrong she seemed, my heart still softened. I pulled her into my arms. "It's okay. I'm here. You don't need to be afraid." She burst into tears. "Mom, I'm sorry. Pain only becomes real when it finally lands on you." After going through it herself, my daughter had finally understood how devastating betrayal could be. For the first time, she felt a kind of empathy between women. I had always raised her with protection and guidance. But the foster family's wealth meant there were too many pleasant voices around her. Without a strong sense of self, it was all too easy to lose her way. Fortunately, life gave her a sharp slap across the face and forced her to turn back in time. And fortunately, I'd held myself back then and didn't block that slap for her. Emily told me about Ryan. She said he was a scholarship student from a very poor background, an orphan who'd grown up relying on the kindness of others. He had excellent grades. One rainy day, he'd saved her when she was being harassed by some thugs. Over time, gratitude turned into affection, and they started dating. I asked her whether she'd ever revealed anything about our family. Emily nodded. "Ryan works really hard. He's always talking about how rough his life has been." Wanting to comfort him, she told him a lot about our family. She'd even said that her parents had only one child, that the foster family's assets would eventually all be hers, and that she'd take good care of him. This foolish child had invited a wolf into her home without even realizing it. I was furious at her lack of judgment and was about to scold her when I raised my hand. Emily flinched. She knew I was angry. David said calmly, "You learned by getting burned. She'll know better next time." I shot him a glare. Spoiling a child is the same as ruining them. What if she makes the same mistake again? David immediately played peacemaker. "She won't. Emily knows she was wrong, right?" Emily nodded quickly and looked at me with a pleading expression. This man. He didn't even have children, yet he spoke as if he knew everything. With nowhere to vent my frustration, I pinched him hard when no one was looking. I hired a private investigator to look into Ryan and Chloe's affair. The results were shocking. Even the child Chloe was carrying was questionable. Chapter 10. According to the records from a private hospital, Chloe was already 6 months pregnant. But 6 months earlier, Chad had been overseas on business the entire time, and I'd been with him. Which meant Chloe and Ryan had pulled off a neat little switch. A month later, Emily took time off and went back to the foster house. The moment she stepped inside, she nearly tripped over baby supplies scattered everywhere. Her grandmother was glowing with pride, opening a gold bracelet and slipping it onto Chloe's wrist. When she saw Emily, her face filled with disdain. "Why are you back all of a sudden? Aren't you in school? This is my home. Why can't I come back?" "Fine, do whatever you want. Anyway, all the family assets will belong to your brother from now on. Study or don't, it's up to you." Chloe chimed in sweetly, putting on a show. "Emily, you came back at the perfect time. Your dad and I are getting engaged next week. Which ring do you think looks better?" My daughter rolled her eyes and went upstairs. She was already used to her grandmother's obsession with sons. Just as I'd instructed her, she went to the study, grabbed something, and left. As she was coming back downstairs, Chad walked in. They ran into each other head-on. Emily turned her face away, ready to leave. Chad grabbed her arm. "What's that about? You see your father and don't even say hello?" Emily snapped back, "Aren't you only thinking about your son now? Why do you even care about me? Who taught you to talk like that? I'm your father." "Oh," she said flatly. "And?" Chad was caught off guard by her passive resistance. For some reason, He felt that the look in his daughter's eyes carried something else entirely, pity? That look unsettled him, though he couldn't quite explain why. He was about to question her further when Chloe suddenly called out from inside, saying the baby had kicked and telling him to come quickly. Chad's attention shifted at once. He turned and hurried inside. In his haste, he didn't notice the document folder and suitcase in his daughter's hands. That night, Emily and I lay on the bed talking. She asked me how I planned to deal with her father. I didn't want my child to carry psychological scars about marriage, so I told her I wasn't going to deal with her father. On the contrary, I was going to save him. She propped herself up. Save him? Why? For you. Even though your father and I are no longer together, you're still his child. You have legal inheritance rights. I can't just stand by and let someone scheme against him and leave you with nothing. She didn't seem satisfied with the answer. If you think that way, why were you so determined to divorce him in the first place? I brushed my fingers gently over her eyes. Those dark pupils, so much like Chad's. Because the person I love most is myself. I won't accept being wronged in a relationship. But the second person I love most is you, and I'll do everything I can to protect my daughter's rights. Your mom is a selfish woman. I put my own feelings first. And in the future, I hope you won't give up yourself for children or for money either, okay? Emily nodded. Mom, I'm sorry for how I treated you back then. It's okay, I said. Mom loves you. Chapter 11. Before long, it was time for Chad and Chloe's engagement party. Quite a few friends and relatives showed up, most wearing polite, carefully measured smiles as they congratulated Chad on the engagement and the baby. As the bride-to-be, Chloe was openly pleased with herself. What was even more outrageous was that she'd invited Ryan and seated him at the table for close friends and family. Just as Chloe linked arms with Chad and went to toast Ryan, Emily and I arrived, with David trailing behind us, having insisted on coming along to watch the spectacle. How much of a battlefield it was at that moment, only the three of us who knew the truth, and Chloe and Ryan across from us, could truly feel it. When Chad saw me, a flicker of amazement crossed his eyes. These days, without elderly relatives to care for, I'd finally had time to focus on myself. I'd grown my hair long into loose waves, invested generously in skincare and aesthetic treatments with my divorce settlement, and before we left, my daughter had helped style me in a polished, mature look. Even David had been momentarily transfixed, let alone Chad. He walked over. You came to drink the engagement wine? Many of the people there had attended our wedding, as well as our 10- and 20-year anniversary dinners. The moment I appeared, more than a few expressions turned knowing. I tilted my head at him. I'm here to give a gift. A very special gift. I handed him a brown envelope. Just as Chad reached out to take it, Chloe snatched it away. What's this? She asked sweetly. Anna. I smiled. Oh. His medical report. He had a full checkup before the divorce. I forgot to give it to him. Under Chad's puzzled gaze, Chloe opened the envelope. The report stated clearly that Chad's reversal surgery had gone wrong and that he had temporarily lost his ability to conceive, advising him to seek immediate medical treatment. Chloe's face drained of color inch by inch. Her hands began to tremble. What do you mean? She stammered. Chad saw it too. He frowned, snatched the report from her hands, and read it carefully. The more he read, the darker his face became, until his voice turned hoarse. So I can't have children at all? Then, whose child is the one you're carrying? Chloe played dumb. Of course it's yours. This report must be fake. That's impossible, Chad snapped. Anna and I did that checkup together. I can confirm the results with one phone call. She has no reason to lie to me. So you're saying I'm lying? Chloe clenched her teeth, refusing to back down. We slept together 3 times that night. How could I not get pregnant? Maybe the doctor made a mistake. The baby in my belly is your son. Chad froze, his gaze turning increasingly sinister. That night, we only slept together once. Something came up at the company, and I went back to work. He stepped closer to her, one step at a time. So the other 2 times, who were you with? I know. Emily suddenly spoke up, adding fuel to the fire as she pulled out the photos I'd uncovered earlier. The other 2 times, Chloe slept with my boyfriend, Ryan. She tossed a stack of photos onto the table. They showed Chad leaving after dates with Chloe, followed shortly after by Ryan arriving to meet her, the two of them heading straight into hotels. Among them was also a medical report stating that Chloe was actually 32 weeks pregnant. My former mother-in-law, who had been standing there in a daze, finally snapped back to her senses. Furious, she charged forward. "You slut. How dare you cuckold my son?" Ryan rushed out to stop her. The moment he got close, Chad knocked him to the ground with a punch. The room descended into total chaos. I seized the chance to leave with Emily and David. Chapter 12. What happened afterward made the news. The entire city knew. Chloe lost the baby during the scuffle. My former mother-in-law was hospitalized in a rage. With a prior history of stroke, her condition wasn't good. Chad's business didn't suffer much, but he himself became visibly dispirited, deeply suspicious of any woman who came near him. He was desperate to repair his relationship with Emily. But shaken by everything that had happened, Emily developed a strong aversion to marriage and men. She threw herself into her studies, vowing to devote her passion to scientific research. How should I put it? The intention was admirable, but there was no need to rush quite so hard. I didn't try to talk her out of it right away. I've always believed that parents are a mirror for their children. If you genuinely love your life, put in 100% effort, and show your child enough goodwill, she will inevitably absorb the best parts of you. During my internship at the law firm, I worked diligently and completed every task David assigned me with care. Before long, I became the most outstanding intern in my cohort. The day I received the firm's annual bonus, my eyes filled with tears. This was the first time in my life that I'd handed myself an answer sheet earned through effort. In the future, there would be more of these answers, better ones, stronger ones. After the annual gala, David confessed his feelings to me. I turned him down. I even patted his shoulder and lightly brainwashed him. "Boss, we're not young anymore. Stop filling your head with romance. We should be focused on making money." David ground his teeth. "Fine. Fine. You've rejected me again." But this time, he said it with a smile. At our age, love was no longer the only option. And we weren't going to live or die over something so vague and illusory. We were still moving forward with determination, our eyes set on a much wider horizon. Chapter 13. It was only natural that Chad would come looking for me. We'd been married for 20 years, nearly half of each other's lives. After being schemed against and left badly shaken, his instinct was to pull everything back onto familiar tracks as quickly as possible. He showed up outside my office building with 99 roses and a Rolls-Royce Cullinan. At the time, I was inside with David, deep in discussion over a case, both of us talking animatedly. Chad shoved the bouquet toward me. "Chang Chang." David visibly shuddered beside me. In broad daylight, where did this ghost crawl out from? His mouth was as sharp as ever. I shot him a look. Then I turned to Chad. "Do you need something?" He glanced awkwardly at David before answering hesitantly, I wanted to ask you to dinner." It must have been deeply uncomfortable for him to chase after a woman so humbly at his age, especially for the lofty chairman of Foster Holdings. I looked at him and smiled. "Sorry. I have a work dinner tonight related to a case. Can't make it." "Then, tomorrow?" "Tomorrow doesn't work." "The day after?" "That doesn't work either." Chad's eyes reddened. He softened his voice and pleaded, "Anna, can't you give me one more chance?" I replied calmly, "What, so you can cheat on me again?" "No, no," he said hurriedly. "I swear I'll never have another woman again. I can sign an agreement, if I cheat, all my assets go to you. I'm not interested. Besides, your mother is still waiting for a grandson. With my body, I can't have children." "We won't have any," Chad said quickly, thinking he saw hope. "We'll only have Emily. Once she graduates college, I'll bring her into the company. Foster Holdings will all be hers eventually. We can live happily again, just like before. Okay?" At some point, Chad had become blindly confident, convinced that as long as he turned back, I would still be standing where he left me, waiting. Unfortunately for him, no one in this world is indispensable, and not everyone is blinded by money. I still remember those suffocating days. I remember the ugliness of his face, and I remember that when I was completely alone, there was no one standing behind me. Once, he was my sky. When that sky collapsed, it nearly crushed me to death. Now, I hold myself up with my own hands. Candy and roses are no longer enough to tempt me. I reached out and took a rose, lifted it to my nose, and inhaled. It smelled wonderful, so good it instantly lifted my mood. I looked at Chad. I imagine my eyes must have been brighter and clearer than ever. Chad, my life is good now. I'm satisfied. I don't need an extra you to bring bad luck into it. With that, I turned and walked away without looking back. I hadn't gone far before David shamelessly caught up with me. A work dinner related to a case? Who invited you? Why didn't I know about it? You did, I said. You're the boss. What's wrong with taking a top performer out to dinner? David laughed. Fair enough. Come on, lobsters on me. Oh, by the way, I added casually, can you bump my commission from that Jiangbei case up by one more point? You're already getting plenty. I know, but last night when I went to discuss the case with you, you were wearing nothing but a towel. That caused me physical trauma. I'm requesting compensation. You're complaining about 8-pack abs? 8? I clearly only saw one. You. Their voices faded as the two of us walked away together. Behind us, Chad slowly lowered the bouquet in his hands. His Chang seemed different now. No longer gentle. No longer quiet. Like a rose with thorns, blooming beautifully under the winter sun. At last, he understood. There was no going back. Epilogue. Chapter 1. In Emily's first year of graduate school, her father married again. Her stepmother was also a woman born into wealth, widowed in middle age and pushed by her family into another strategic marriage. After a lifetime of privilege, she didn't really have the freedom to say no. They lived together without much warmth or conflict. The following year, she gave birth to a son. Emily's grandmother passed away shortly before the new year, never getting to see the grandson she had longed for. Her grandfather, however, was pleased and visited often, though the stepmother, having heard about the foster family's past scandals, preferred that he not come around too much. Emily joined the most elite research group at her university. Out of 8 members, she was the only woman. The pressure was overwhelming, and she often broke down while racing to meet paper deadlines. What made it even harder was the group's standout star, a true prodigy. Problems no one else could solve, he handled with ease. He could even take things further, optimizing processes and improving outcomes. At 1 in the morning, Emily hid in a hallway and vented to her mother on the phone. Her mother listened, smiling. Sweetheart, no matter how things turn out, I'm proud of you. You need to remember, the group you're in is already the best of the best. As long as you've done your utmost and have no regrets, don't torment yourself too much, okay? If it really comes to that, you can always come home, she said lightly. Mom can take care of you. I just won a case, my biggest commission so far. Emily froze. That's a lot. Mom, you're amazing. I think you're amazing too, her mother replied. On the other end of the line, a very faint mutter suddenly came through. Are you done yet? My hands are getting tired. Almost. It was Uncle David. Hadn't Mom rejected him? Just as Emily was about to ask, her mother hurriedly ended the call. All right, Mom has to get back to work. We'll talk next time. Even though the call ended quickly, Emily still caught the sentence that followed. David, you're discussing a case. Put your pants back on. Uncle David was intense. After chasing her mom for so many years, he'd finally made a qualitative breakthrough. Emily tilted her head back and sighed. I really want a muscle guy too. Just as she was about to enter the lab, footsteps echoed down the hallway. And just like that, Emily locked eyes with the prodigy, Daniel. Chapter 2. 3 years later, Emily married Daniel. Her stepmother's child was already 3 years old and loved clinging to her, but Emily disliked her father and felt little connection to this half-brother. After graduating, she stayed on at the university as a lecturer and bought a place next to her mother's. Every day after classes, she and Daniel walked home hand in hand. Uncle David's long-running courtship plan seemed to have stalled. He hadn't shown up for more than a week. Her mother was clearly in low spirits, always looking downcast. So Emily egged her on to storm the boss's mansion. Her mother hesitated a bit, then charged straight to David's place that very night. That was when she learned the reason David had gone cold for a week. There was a tumor in his brain. About the size of an egg. No one knew yet whether it was benign or malignant. From the moment it was discovered, David had already planned his own funeral. He even joked with her, saying that when he was gone, she could fill his house with as many younger men as she liked. Over the years, Uncle David had spoiled her mother badly, doubling her temper. But at that moment, she was eerily calm. Her eyes were red, her voice cold as ice as she spoke word by word. Fine. Then I'll hire 2 more hot guys to dance on your grave. The surgery was scheduled for 3 days later. During those 3 days, her mother took meticulous care of Uncle David in the hospital. After the tumor was removed and sent for testing, the results finally came back. Benign. On the day the report arrived, her mother stood by David's hospital bed, ring in hand, and proposed to him. That grown man cried so hard his whole body shook. After a long pause, he haughtily raised his middle finger. Her mother fell silent. They registered their marriage soon after. Emily even posted about it on social media. Her grandfather saw it and called. "Your mother got married?" "Yes." "Congratulations." "Oh. Is she happy now?" Emily looked at the two people not far away, laughing and bickering on the balcony, and couldn't help smiling. She answered softly, "She is. She always has been. Every woman who chooses to love herself first within marriage will live well. Because they are not vines clinging to men, but resilient flowers, able to fall in midsummer and rise again on their own, full of vitality, free, and growing boldly into the wind." At this point, my love life is a public service announcement. Free of charge.